Welcome to Wandering Jews at J Squared Adventures. Travel far enough and you meet yourself.
We're your hosts. I'm Scott.
I'm Sorrel. Imagine that you need to hide. Imagine that you can never share who you really are. That you need to watch every action and all of your behavior. Not just your own, but your loved ones, your family. For fear that you will be discovered. You will be turned in. You will be punished. Now imagine that your hiding is not a matter of hours, or days, or weeks, or even years. Imagine that hiding your innermost self is a centuries-old habit passed down from parent to child. To the point that as centuries pass, it's difficult to actually discern between who you are and who you're pretending to be.
Welcome to the world of the secret Jews, sometimes remembered as conversos, those who converted to Christianity, or marranos, a Spanish word meaning pigs, as they were called by old Christians, by veteran Christians, or bnei anusim in Hebrew, the children who have been coerced. Welcome to the world of the exile of the Jews from Spain, 1492, and Portugal, 1496, and the Inquisition launched by the Catholic Church across the Iberian Peninsula in Spain from 1478 to 1834, and in Portugal from 1536 to 1821.
When we're talking about the Iberian Peninsula, for centuries it had been this crucible of Jewish life, a land of both extraordinary flourishing and also agonizing decline. And if you imagine a vibrant community, its roots stretching back to antiquity, its voice resonating through the halls of scholarship and commerce.
Most definitely, and we remember, particularly under Islamic rule, Al-Andalus became a golden age. It was a beacon of intellectual and cultural brilliance. Jewish scholars, physicians, poets, they thrived. They shaped the very fabric of society, Jewish and otherwise. Yet, this golden age, and maybe that's what golden ages are all about, they're very fragile and they are destined to shatter.
Absolutely. And so the Christian conquest, the more that they gained momentum, the shadows lengthened, and what was originally tolerance gave way to suspicion and then just outright hatred. The horrific pogroms of 1391 unleashed a wave of terror, forcing mass conversions and shattering that golden age, as you said, shattering the community's foundations.
The establishment of the Inquisition, a tool of religious terror, it further tightened the noose. Conversos, again, Jews forced to convert to Catholicism, they lived under a constant, suffocating fear that they would be found out. This was the prelude to the cataclysm, the Alhambra Decree of 1492. The decree of expulsion of the Jews from Spain, a brutal uprooting that would forever scar the landscape of Jewish history. The vibrant tapestry of Sephardic life, woven over the centuries, was literally torn asunder.
Driven from the landscape they had called home for over 1,000 years, nearly 120,000 Jewish refugees sought sanctuary across the treacherous mountain passes into Portugal. A desperate exodus, only to find when they arrived there, a less than welcoming reception. History echoes. We know this. Refugees are rarely met with open, welcoming arms. And in Portugal, the poisonous tides of anti-Semitism had surged, fueled by fear and prejudice. The Portuguese monarchy, prioritizing political expediency over human compassion, saw an opportunity. They weaponized this hatred. It's the familiar theme in history, transforming it into a tool of political and economic control, very much mirroring Spain's cruel precedent.
Portugal, like its neighbor, and the two countries were very much in contact one with the other, and the King of Spain, Manuel, had family relations with the Spanish monarchy through marriage. Portugal, like its neighbor, betrayed this hope of refuge. Jews had crossed the mountains, at least some of them. They arrived in Portugal, and the choice offered was brutal. Forced conversion, a hollow facade of faith, or expulsion, the sentence of homelessness. And then the Inquisition, a reign of terror. Its purpose, crush dissent, to enforce conformity of faith. and to extinguish the flickering embers of Jewish identity hidden beneath this veneer of so-called new Christians. This wasn't simply a religious purge. It was a campaign of state-sanctioned persecution. It was designed to control and terrorize those forced to abandon their heritage, and in this case, not in the name of a flag or politics, but in the name of God.
One response to this dilemma could be found in the Portuguese village of Belmonte. The granite hills surrounding Belmonte are perfumed by wild thyme and rosemary. Sculpted by time and solitude, the rugged spine of the Serra da Estrela mountains casts long blue shadows over the rolling Cova de Beira Valley. Here in the heart of inland Portugal, the distant cities of Porto and Lisbon fade into a murmur, and Belmonte seems a place where ancient rhythms hold sway.
The landscape of Belmonte is a tapestry of stone and of life, a mosaic of olive groves clinging to terrace slopes, silvery leaves shimmering in the afternoon sun. Vineyards, their gnarled vines rooted deep in the rocky soil, paint the hillsides in shades of emerald and gold. The air, crisp and clear, carries the bleating of sheep and goats, and at night the calls of foxes and wolves echo through the valleys.
Perched atop a rise, Belmonte almost feels like a world apart, its medieval castle a testament to this frontier outpost. The remoteness is actually a paradox. It's both a blessing and a curse, because it seems to be a place where time slows, where actually it's the beauty of the natural world that reigns, and where secrets are whispered to those who listen. From the ramparts and the towers of the fortress, one cannot escape the sense that seclusion has always defined this place, simultaneously both a barricade and a sanctuary.
So my trip to Belmonte with the University of Pennsylvania Hillel, it was a gray March afternoon. It was very quiet in Belmonte. I have a sense it's always very quiet in Belmonte. We were really there tracing the faded footprints of Jewish history throughout Portugal, Porto and Lisbon, and also meeting the new revived communities. And we also visited Belmonte. We ascended together the ancient castle tower. We wandered through the quiet, on that day, quite rain-washed streets. And we were kind of, searching for the whispers of a hidden legacy, because it definitely wasn't apparent from what you see around you in the streets and the hillsides all around. Between kind of this light rain and these short spurts of sun, we approached a very modest, very modern synagogue. A tall man with a knitted kippah welcomed us, and he introduced himself as Pedro, as Ephraim. His late father had been the rabbi of Belmonte, one of the very last places in Portugal with descendants of so-called secret or crypto-Jews, the descendants of Spanish and Portuguese conversos, forced to convert to Catholicism 500 years ago, and preserving clandestinely their connections and commitments as Jews despite waves of external pressures and the forgetfulness that's inescapable as years turn into decades and decades into centuries.
Far from the prying eyes of royal power and of inquisitional inquiries in Lisbon, Porto, and Coimbra, the secret Jews of the Portuguese hinterland developed ingenious ways to continue Jewish life undercover, while presenting themselves outwardly as new Christians. When we think about what were these ingenious ways that they continued to preserve Jewish life hidden, one example is Shabbat and holiday candles were lit and shutters were closed, or lit candelabras were hidden by a metal cone that hid the light and allowed air to fuel the candle through a narrow open top. Dates of Jewish holidays were shifted, right? So if you think about the Jewish calendar, they would change the dates to coincide so that they could still observe the Jewish holidays, and they were hidden by coinciding to match the dates of the Christian holy days. Moving
the dates of Passover to the date of Easter. Moving the dates of Purim to overlap with Lent, etc.
Which is really quite wild. And, pork and pig products were ubiquitous throughout the Iberian Peninsula. Sometimes those suspected of being Jews were actually forced to consume pork and pig products as a way for them to prove how committed are you to being a new Christian. Some have suggested that tapas developed out of this culinary test of identity, and others have suggested that a particular porkless sausage, famous throughout Portugal, a sausage made with meats like poultry, chicken, duck, game, rabbit, and sometimes veal mixed with bread. Known as algeira, it is sometimes referred to as the Jew sausage. Secret Jews could eat what appeared to be sausage without arousing the suspicion of their neighbors. It's really quite mind-blowing to think the level of subterfuge.
And also the level of how long this period existed.
Yes.
The Inquisition continued at various levels of intensity until the 19th century. And because the basic assumption of Spanish and Portuguese national identity was that being truly Spanish or truly Portuguese meant being Catholic, B'nai Anusim, the progeny of those who had been coerced into adopting Catholicism, continued to hide their Jewish roots for several long centuries. The Inquisition, again, was cast such a pallor of fear that even when the intensity was low, communities of secret Jews were afraid to reveal themselves. It apparently had been extremely effective.
And, we think about male and female roles in this situation. So, while the men went out to work in the fields and orchards and vineyards, it were the women who, while they stayed at home, they were actually safekeeping the hidden traditions because they were responsible for educating and raising their kids. So they kept the fragile ties underground almost. They kept those ties to the Jewish people alive. So actually the special role of women as Jewish and educational role models were referred to as adeiras. They were often responsible for maintaining some of the secret rituals that we talked about and teaching prayers and passing down oral histories. So at a time when it was assumed that the men were the religious authorities and teachers, actually the hidden role played by mothers and grandmothers was an important subterfuge in the establishment of an underground leadership. The adeiras were the silent architects of survival, their wisdom a hidden wellspring in a land where faith was a dangerous secret.
And in the early 20th century, a Polish Jewish engineer came to Portugal as a mining expert, working in the tin and tungsten mines of Vilar Formosa and Belmonte. This Shimon Schwartz asked a colleague where to repair broken equipment and order new tools. He was told, "Oh, you can do it in Belmonte, but beware, don't buy from the Jews." Schwartz, of course, set out to locate the Jews of Belmonte. He and the rest of the Jewish world were ignorant of their existence. When Schwartz presented himself as a Jew to the residents of Belmonte, there was shock, there was denial. On the one hand, the Jewish community of Belmonte feared to reveal their Jewish selves. On the other hand, they just simply couldn't believe it, that Schwartz was a Jew. They literally believed they were the last Jews on the face of the earth.
The Belmonte Jews were not content at just accepting on face value that he was Jewish. So what did they do? They quizzed Schwartz to check his claim of Jewishness. So when he recited the words of Shema in Hebrew, finally, they understood that their age-long years in hiding had finally ended because they were not the last remaining Jews on earth. There were other Jews in the world. Schwartz traveled through the mountains of Portugal in an attempt to contact and chronicle the incredible story of the secret Jews of places like Belmonte. His The New Christians in Portugal in the 20th Century rocked the Jewish world and encouraged contacts, research, and engagement with this unique, sometimes the word unique is overused, but it's a truly unique Jewish community.
For sure. And years later, in 1974, Ron Ben Yishai, the famous journalist of the Israel Broadcasting Authority, produced the film The Marranos of Portugal. In 1990, the illustrious French Jewish photographer Brenner produced The Last Marranos. Both films contributed to revealing the story of Belmonte and the other Portuguese Jewish communities where secret Jews had resided and sharing their story with the outside world. During the 1920s, there may have been as many as 200-300 Jews in Belmonte. Pedro Ephraim shared with the UPenn Hillel that there are today some 50 Jews left in Belmonte 2025.
Wow.
Ephraim's son like many young people throughout the small villages of rural Portugal, and again, that's obviously not connected with being Jewish or etc., the search for new opportunities, wider vistas, the lack of opportunities within the small villages and the mountain towns, people head out to make their path in life. And Ephraim shared that his son is learning Hebrew, mainly using things like Duolingo, and is planning to make Aliyah to join the Israel Defense Forces and build his life in Israel. The UPenn students were full of questions. They were so into it, and you could see they were inspired. They were shaken. They were excited by this visit and by meeting Pedro, by meeting Ephraim. The long road of the Jews of Belmonte back to the Jewish people, it's a living testimony to the famous saying, the eternal people are not afraid of a long road.
Wow.
As we concluded our reunion with Ephraim in the Belmonte Synagogue, I also was very moved, and I could only think of the verses that I find myself reciting on every visit that I make to Europe, regardless of where it is specifically. It's a text that for me really speaks to this question of walking in the footsteps of our ancestors with all of the rising and falling tides of the Jewish story. And the text is the vision of Ezekiel, the valley of the dry bones. In this isolated granite corner of Belmonte, where the improbable story of underground Jewish resistance unfolded, I chose to share this emblematic prophetic portion. It speaks of Ephraim. It uses that name of Judah, of Joseph, the names of our ancestors, and of course the very name of our host within one of Portugal's three precious contemporary synagogues. I also mentioned it because the vision of the Valley of the Dry Bones, it tells one of the oldest dreams in Jewish history. An indigenous people uprooted and exiled by ravenous empires from our homes and homeland and scattered throughout the world, and yet standing at places like the Memorial to the Murdered Jews of Europe in Berlin, or in the courtyards of the Dohan Synagogue in Budapest, or on the heights of Masada, where a fragment of Ezekiel's vision was unearthed in the excavations overseen by Yigal Yadin. The aspiration to return home has always been part of Jewish dream and of Jewish life. And in Belmonte, I instinctually, drew that text to close our session. And I just want to quote a couple of lines from it that I shared at that moment in the synagogue. I will take the people of Israel from among the nations and gather them from every quarter of the globe, and I will bring them to their own land. I will make them a single nation in the land on the hills of Israel. Ezekiel 37. I choked up as I recited these words 2,500 years ago. His dream is our dream. And when I finished and I turned to hug Ephraim, he pointed to a plaque in the corner of the synagogue marking the dedication of the synagogue in 1996. He smiled a wide smile. You could see he was very happy to share, and he was very proud of the synagogue and his community and of the way that we all were taken in by his story. And he pointed to the bottom of the plaque. And on the bottom of the plaque, the words from the very verses I just recited from Ezekiel were there at the bottom of the plaque. And these bones shall live. Wow. In Belmonte, together with the students from Hillel University of Penn, I think all of us had discovered not only our history in the sense of something that happened then and there, but we had really been united with our long-lost brothers and sisters of our Jewish family as kind of doing the zoom out and thinking about kind of why I do what I do. This is it. Those are the moments that we hope for, that hopefully we can make a connection with people and a place and leave thinking, hey, it's not their story, it's our story. And now, something for the road. A tip, a recommendation to help you make every journey your own.
Hi, this is Miki Mezzini, tour educator in J Square. I'm guiding in Israel, Morocco, Spain, and Portugal. And here, some things for the road. I want to start with a quote. What lives for centuries, but can still die before its own birth. This was taken from a book written by Richard Zimler, the last Kabbalist of Lisbon. So, 1506, after a year of drought and a plague in Lisbon, a massacre against the Jews started. And this gives the background for the last Kabbalist of Lisbon, the thriller. The book tells the story of Abraham Zarko, the last Kabbalist of Lisbon, who was murdered in his own house in a secret place. His nephew, Barakia, conversos named Pedro, is understanding that this was a murder not as part of the riots, and is getting into a journey of searching and looking who killed his uncle. While doing his investigation, the book provides us a very wide picture of the life of Portugal during that time. Zimmler did a very wide research on that period of time, and getting into all the details, including the food they were eating, what they were dressing, and how they lived, and the conversos, and also the parts of some of the characters in the book are Muslim, who also lived in that area during that time, and the life of the Christians. And he thread together a story of the life of the Jews in Portugal during that period of time between forced conversion and having to completely become fully Catholic Christians. The dilemmas, the different ways Jews were accepting the news. Some accepted it fully and converted. Some, as we speak about the crypto Jews, started to live a life as in secret. Some tried to escape, which was not easy during that time. Although they didn't have passport, to go on a ship, you need to have the right papers that will enable you to board ships. So during this fascinating time, different ways of handling the forced conversion is depicted in the book, and all going through another very important achievement of the golden age of Spain, and using the Kabbalah as the way that the nephew of Abraham is finding the clues to solve his uncle murder. I will not tell you who did it, but eventually they find who did it. And the final page of the story is telling us where the family goes to, and how the family ends up, and where the family ends up. And when coming to Portugal, please enjoy reading this book prior to your visit. And I hope to see you in each of J Square trips, either around the world or in Israel.
Thanks for listening. Dive deeper into the world of travel on our J Squared Adventures website. That's j2adventures.com. And stay in the loop with our latest adventures on all our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, all under J2 Adventures. And if you enjoyed hanging out with us, don't forget to leave us a comment, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, travel safely and keep wondering. I'm Sorel.
I'm Scott.
See you soon with the Wandering Jews.